Welcome to Timberline Bass Podcast, your place for Wisconsin bass fishing and everything outdoors.
Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Timberline Bass Podcast. Tonight, I wanted to do something a little bit different, kind of do more of a deep dive into more specific technique. Um, and starting out, I didn't think there was a better one than dock fishing. Um, that's kind of our bread and butter between me, Dad, and Dylan. You know, we're kind of known for that. So I figured there wasn't anybody better I could bring on to help explain this other than my dad, Kurt Scheer.
Hey
How's it
everybody.
going?
Good. Glad to be here.
Here I gotta pull my notes back up. So, so well, kind of. I mean, unfortunately, the way we do it, fishing docks isn't just fishing docks. It's skipping. It's knowing which docks are worth your time, knowing how to tell what parts of a dock are gonna play. There's so much more to it than just buzzing a bait down the edge of a dock. Um, Starting out kind of when did you start fishing docks? I mean, I can't imagine that's how you started out.
No, did a lot of. I mean, we mainly fished just shoreline and um weed edges, stuff like that in the early '90s, late '80s and stuff. But actually, one of my old tournament partners, Kerry Beaver, kind of got me doing it probably mid '90s. He actually used to skip around docks with a spinner bait, and then I kind of took it to the jig and started skipping a jig primarily. But no, I mean, I would say probably 94, 95. Started spending more time on docks. A lot of the lakes I started fishing on and that I guided on, Miller Dam and Otter, are not known as dock lakes, and they're not good dock lakes. I mean, yes, you can go the couple docks that are on Miller. Once in a while you can catch a fish off of one. Otter, once in a while you'll catch a fish off a dock, but there's not very many docks, and they're not a predominant dock pattern lake. So I mean, we fished offshore and shoreline and wood on those bodies of water. But when I started traveling more, um, especially I would say probably the mid to late '90s, when I started traveling all over the state more and started learning that the docks were a big player, is when I really started putting most of my time into it.
You know, um, w- why do docks consistently produce bass? Like you said, not every lake is a good dock lake. I mean, we've even been on some where there's freaking docks everywhere and look like they should be absolutely phenomenal, but it's just not a thing. What makes a good dock lake?
Well, it's really not the easiest thing to explain. Generally, gin crystal clear bodies of water a lot of times aren't real good dock lakes, but it's mainly because you have a deep grass line. Um, for me, I look for a lake that, yes, may have grass, but it's got some stain to it, a little bit off color, gets an algae bloom in the summertime, um, and clear bodies of water at times, especially smallmouth, will hold a lot of fish. An aqua is one of those that's clear, but docks are very good, but not every dock. Um, so I look for a lake that's got a little bit of stain. Um, Generally, a lake that's got a lot of docks will be a good dock lake, but every dock on the lake will not be good.
Yeah, not
Um,
all docks are created equal, and
correct.
there's docks are definitely one of the things where there is a quantifiable pattern. When you figure out where they want to be on a dock and which docks are freaking hitting, normally it's pretty repeatable.
Correct. And it's a lot of times different. It can be different day to day. A lot of times it's week by week it'll be different. Um, Sometimes they want to be on the shallow docks, sometimes they want to be on the deeper docks. They're not always going to be using the same docks. I look for pre-spawn. I look for docks that are closer to deeper water, strictly because the bigger females will stage on those docks before they move into the real shallow water. So pre-spawn, I normally look for docks that are on a steeper 45-degree bank or just in the mouth of pockets leading into flat spawning pockets. And them normally will be the better ones. And then you lead into spawn, which of course, I mean, during the spawn, yes, there can be females moving in and out. We'll use those same docks. A lot of times, immediately post spawn, the really shallow docks will get good because the females would just move to the docks in that spawning pocket and use it as cover and ambush points. Because normally, right when they're getting done, bass are getting done spawning, the bluegills are starting to move into spawn. So it's God's way of letting the females and the males, when they get done spawning, have an easy meal, more or less.
Yeah.
The bluegills are coming to them, so they take advantage of it and feed heavily, and then progressively moves out from there out to the deeper docks normally. But Wisconsin is a little bit, the Northwoods is different fishing docks up here than it is down south. Down south, you normally want to find the deeper docks, the docks that have wind blowing on them, floating docks. It seems like when you get north of Illinois, it's more shallower docks, flatter pocket docks. Um, Not as much floating docks. Floating docks will play, but a lot of times your permanent wood structure docks, your boat lifts, stuff like that. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but like I said, down south, a lot of times you want docks that the wind is blowing on, where it just seems like up north, they want to be in flat com pockets, or flat com docks are your better docks.
Yeah, I've
I'm
spent
giving away way too many secrets there, but I mean
right.
that's kind of what you look for.
I've spent so many days trying to do the windy docks because it is, so much of the information out there is so southern related, and you can't help but try it, especially when you're having a struggle bus day. But it just sucks. The boat control sucks. Some of these docks to get the right angle on, you're getting in weird places, and the wind's pushing you into shit, and you're breaking stuff, and it just
It's a lot easier now with power poles and spot lock and stuff like that. Makes it a million times easier than when I first started doing it. When I first started doing it, you didn't have a choice but to fish the com docks because boat control on windy docks was horrible. One thing I
right.
have noticed is fish still will use windy docks. The nice thing is normally if they're on the windy docks, you don't have to skip. You don't have to make quite as good of a cast. You can run your baits down the edges of the docks or across the face of the docks. On a windy dock, the fish are willing to move out and hit something. On the
Yeah.
calm docks, you normally got to get it into the darkest part. The most shade you can get to is normally where they are.
Right. Before we get into the real nitty gritty of everything, I got one fun one. What is your most embarrassing dock fishing moment? We've all got one, freaking rattling a pontoon in front of the owner, or
Oh yeah, that's happened. You
trying
feel
to
like an idiot.
trying to
Um,
unstick somebody's jig off the dock and making a leap of faith and eating the dock.
that would be you.
Yep.
I did once. I did once. Was trying to get a bait off of a dock, and I started getting. It was before power poles, before spot lock, so I had 1 foot on the front, very front bow of the boat on the gel coat, and 1 foot on the dock, trying to reach around the corner to get the bait off, and of course your foot slips off the gel coat, and you take a swim.
Yep.
That would be my most embarrassing one.
All righty. So now we'll kind of go on why docks hold bass. There's so many parts of it with the cover, the shade factor, bluegill population around docks, crappies and bait fish, dock posts, make an ambush point. We'll kind of go through some of these things and just kind of break down, explain why they are a factor. Starting out with shade. How does shade play into dock fishing for somebody that's just starting out?
Well, anybody knows fish anatomy, bass don't have eyelids. So bass can't close their eyes. They can't protect themselves from the sun. So when they're out in the sun in shallower water, they can't see as well. So bass will use shade as their ambush so they can see. So a lot of times they will sit in the darkest part of the dock they can find, but close to where the light is. Because a lot of times your bait fish will stay in the light. So the bait fish will swim by them. They can see them, but the bait fish can't see the bass. So it just gives them an ambush opportunity. That is the main thing with shade. The two reasons is it's an ambush point and they can see better and they don't have eyelids.
The next one is, I don't care where you go in the state, there is always panfish and bluegills, crappies, always around docks, rock bass. What about the docks? I mean, because clearly they're not using it as an ambush point the same way a bass is. What is it that holds the smaller fish there?
Again, they don't have eyelids, so they also try to look for shade. But the zooplankton and all of the little bugs and insects and little minnows and stuff hang around the dock. So it's just an ecosystem. So everything gets every metal post, every bottom of a boat, every wood post gets algae growing on it. So that draws in zooplankton. So that draws the insects and the really small bait fish that are feeding on that, which in turn brings in the bluegills and the crappies, and they're feeding on that smaller bait fish, and which in turns brings the bass that are feeding on the bigger bait fish.
Right. Oh, and then the next one here before we get into some more of the other questions with this, to an extent, dock posts are an ambush point, but as well as I mean, you're the one who taught me it. There are angles on a dock. I mean, your average person when they're running docks is casting down both sides, and they might plop a bait frickin' 6 inches to a foot up under the end of the dock. But kind of go into it a little bit, how much picking apart a dock can matter and why it matters.
Well, angles on docks are everything. Fish will use, yes, dock posts. You wouldn't think a 2 inch around dock post would be an ambush point for a 5 pound largemouth, but they're looking for something to back up against. And normally the more high pressure or the dirtier the water is, the tighter they'll back up to something. It's a safety thing for them. Same thing if you get in a muddy river system, the fish will be really tight into wood. They're using it, they're backing up in it. It's a safety net. It gives them an ambush point and it makes them feel safe. So they'll do the same thing with dock posts. But angles and picking apart a dock, what I've found is yes, there are always key areas of a dock that what I call the obvious or the always sweet spot. And normally that is the deepest part of the shade. It can be under a boat on a boat lift or just under a boat lift that's got a canopy that's making shade, whether there's a boat there or not. Um, I normally what I do when I start is the first couple docks I fish, I will really pick them apart because every day, sometimes even hour to hour, they'll change. But every day, the fish will be on a certain point or a certain part of the dock, whether it has to do with water depth, because your walkway may go from 6 inches deep to a foot and a half. The walkway may be 6 inches deep to 5 feet deep. So sometimes the walkway is the key. Sometimes under the biggest section of the platform is the key. Sometimes if they've got a ladder on it, ladders, a lot of times the fish will back up to the ladder. Sometimes they'll have staircases going up in 2 feet of water where they go on and off for water skiing or jet skiing that's on the walkway. Sometimes they'll use that. Um, Again, boat lifts make it better. Tied up boats to the dock can make it
Yeah.
better. Pontoons make them better. So the first couple docks I will really pick apart until I figure out what part of the dock the majority of the fish are using or what depth of the dock. And then I will do that on the first 2 or 3 docks, and I will see. And a lot of times you'll get like the walkway you may catch 14-incher off of. And then you throw under the center of the dock in the deepest part of the shade and you catch a 2.5-pounder. But now you get around to the other side, and there's a pontoon, and you skip under the pontoon and you get a 5-pounder.
Yeah.
Well, now you go to the next dock and that same pattern shows itself. The walkway, you get a little one. The middle, you get a little bit bigger one. It's got another pontoon, you get a big one. So what I will do, especially in a tournament situation, I mean, if you're fun fishing, every fish is fun to catch. But if you're in a tournament situation, I will start not wasting my time on the walkway or on the center of the dock, and I will just run not on high on my trolling motor, but pretty quick, and I'll just hit every one of the pontoons.
Yeah. Well, and
Because
that's
more than likely, that's where the big one wants to be.
right. Well, and that's one thing too. I think almost needs to be said. Pontoons and boat lifts are almost a pattern of their own.
Correct.
I mean, it's similar, and you're doing it at the same time, so it's easy to lump them together. But sometimes they want to be on pontoons that aren't on a lift, that are just tied
Correct.
up next to it. That's totally different than fishing a pontoon on a lift.
Correct. And there's sometimes they want to be on a pontoon that's pulled up on shore. There's no dock there.
Yeah.
I've broken down several different patterns where I won't fish a dock at all, and all I'll do is go around to the pontoons that are tied up to shore.
Right. And I think another thing too that I think is really important to mention going into this too, um, for people starting out, you have every right to fish anything that is touching water.
Correct.
It is your right to fish docks, pontoons, boats.
Correct.
You do not have to take harassment from homeowners. You
Correct.
don't have you. That's harassment. You don't have to do that. But what is our responsibility is to not damage other people's property. Them
Exactly.
people bust their ass for their pontoon and their dock. Stuff happens. I mean, when you're
Yep.
learning, honestly, I think the best way to learn to skip is to go find a freaking shoreline with some overhanging willows and practice skipping under willows because they get as low to the water. I would argue sometimes they're even harder to skip because there's less of a margin for error.
Correct.
Learn doing something where you're not going to break people's shit. And
Correct.
in the off chance you do hang up in a gas line, which we've seen
No.
happen before,
Mm-hmm.
don't be a dickhead and yank on it.
No.
You do whatever you got to do to get up there and do the kind thing and unhook it, make sure there is no damage done to the property. And if you damage property, you need to own up and take responsibility
Correct.
for what you did and not run away.
Correct.
Uh,
And
I
no
mean that
no dock owner or property owner wants to come fall and it's time to take their dock out. I mean, a lot of people now hire people to take them out. Nobody's touching the bottom of the dock anymore. They're coming in with a lift and picking them up and putting them on shore. But you still have a lot of homeowners that will pull them out themselves
yeah,
or readjust them themselves. Nobody wants to reach under a dock to grab a crank or to grab chains to help pick up and get a jig or a Senko hook stuck in their hand.
yeah,
So by all means, if you can, get it out. I mean, a dock owner, yes, you have every right to fish anything that's in the water. Their property ends at the shoreline.
yep,
Now, but stating that, the dock is private property.
right,
So if you do hang up on a dock or you do hang up underneath and you have to get out of the boat on the dock or something to get your bait back, and the homeowners around or the dock owners around, by all means, ask. It's better to ask for, in this case, it's better to ask for permission than to ask for forgiveness. I mean, a
Yeah,
dock owner will
trespassing's
be
trespassing.
correct. And anything that is private property in the water is private property. You have no right to go on somebody's pontoon
Yep.
or go on somebody's boat lift to get your stuff back. Most most homeowners, most lake owners are pretty good
We'll
about that.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Correct. I've even had some come down, if you skip docks long enough, or even sometimes not very long at all, you're going to find out that you are going to snag up. I
A
buy
lot.
I buy 30 to 100 jigs a year, and it's 90% of them are because you lose them on a dock.
Yeah. My jig box weighs 50 pounds, and that is the most expensive thing in my boat
Correct.
because they're not cheap and you lose
No.
them. You can't go into dock fishing being a tight ass because at the end of the day, baits are expendables. The quicker you can get into that mentality and understand it, the happier you'll be. I mean, if you're fishing docks, you're going to piss away $5 to $20 a day. It is what it
And
is. It's a
it's what it is. But
but
so my biggest suggestion to people getting started, like you said, you can go skip willows, or the other thing is go to a lake that has doesn't have a lot of boats tied up to the docks. Got a bunch of old docks that are, you know, nobody's going to care if you hit the dock with the jig. You
right.
stay away from boats, stay away from pontoons till you get good enough and confident enough that you can do it without damaging property, which, everybody hears this big dong when you hit a pontoon with
You
a
didn't
jig.
do a damn thing to it.
You didn't do anything to the pontoon strictly because lead is way softer than the
Then aluminum.
aluminum or stainless that are on any of these boats or docks or anything. You're not going to hurt anything. Now, gel coat is a different story.
Yeah.
If you're flinging a jig, and that's another thing, is skipping is not about how hard you can throw the bait.
Oh,
When you get good at skipping, it is just a fluid motion. And a lot of times it's way lighter than any other cast you'll ever do. And you can slide a jig in 20 feet almost anywhere.
yeah. And I think,
Underhand pitch skipping is the hardest one to learn and to master,
yeah,
but it's the most effective.
right. And I think that's the most intimidating thing when people see skipping. Granted, now you watch them little Asian guys do it online when they're skipping buzz baits under trees with these super flimsy ultralight rods. That's not what we're talking about. Yes, they're
No,
skipping a bait, but that is not what we're talking about at all. That
no,
rod cannot handle setting a 5/0 hook under a dock. You can't winch them
correct.
out that way. But in that same note, I do it with BFS setup for Cincos and little baits, and I hate to say it, I can winch them out, but I'm
Correct.
using a little bit stiffer rod than you would typically think of for BFS. At that point, it's more of having a good reel that's tuned and set up for what you're doing. Don't just go out and buy a BFS rod and think you're going to skip docks with it. That's not going to pan out very
No,
well.
no.
But yeah,
For,
that
for,
was. Go ahead.
yeah. And for Senkos, I mean, I'm not, to me, when I got to break out a spinning rod in the Senko, I'm hating fishing docks that day because that's
Th-
not my thing. I,
This
I
is
do
my
it. There's
favorite argument we have.
right. And there's days you just have to do it. And I'll be the last one to do it. And I'll be the one that barely gets a limit at the end of the day because at 1 o'clock, I finally decide, okay, if I want to catch a limit, I got to get out the fairy wand and throw a Senko.
Okay, so now this is the key difference on how me and Dad fish docks. Learn from him. Everything I know is from him. But he runs down docks strictly with a jig tied on, maybe a Texas rig,
Yep.
maybe a swim jig.
Yep. Chatterbait.
But you're not gonna see anything finessey. I normally have 3 or 4 rods. I'll have a Texas rig tied on for skipping. I have a jig. I have a Cinco. And then normally I've got something to run down the edges, a moving bait, something a little finessey that way, whether it be a twitch bait or something like that. Now, it screws me a lot I'm not gonna lie, because I'm trying to do too many things at one time. But there are days because the trick is you cycle through the shit until you figure out exactly what they want.
Correct. Now, if you do that on the first 3 or 4 docks,
Yes.
and I will always start with, and actually, as I got to where I fish a lot more moving baits, a lot of times I will start with a chatterbait simply because I can skip a chatterbait under the docks, under the pontoons. I can put them in the same places I can put a jig, but it's a moving bait. So
Right.
I can throw it under there, snap my rod once and start reeling it and see if you get bit. If you get bit on a chatterbait, you can put a lot more fish in the boat a lot faster than anything else. Then I will go to a jig. Then I will go to, unfortunately, a Senko. And, you know,
There's nothing
I'm
wrong with fishing Sinkos.
no, there's not. There's not.
They
And
catch
now
fish.
it was given away at the last BASS Elite tournament. Now the Koiki comes into play.
Yeah, that's the new one on my list of
Correct.
things
And
to
mine
master.
also. Mine also.
Because I tell you what, trying to skip a freaking ball with fingers on it is not as simple as it sounds. Sidearm, yes. I can sidearm
Yes.
skip one of them.
Yes.
Underhand skipping is going to be a whole new freaking nightmare to learn.
Yeah, they like to tumble.
Yeah. But that's one other point before we move on. I want to point out, I I would say for starting out learning to fish docks, Dad's school of thought is better. The jig. A jig is, I don't want to say easier to skip, but the issue with the way I do it is I'm skipping 4 different weights. And when you change weight when you're skipping, it screws you up so bad because you get into whatever the movement is for the weight you're throwing. And if you're constantly flip flopping back and forth and trying to figure that out, you end up with a mess. I mean, that's when accidents happen. That's when shit goes sideways in a hurry. Um, so definitely not a beginner move. Just
No.
putting that out there.
And here's the other thing. So people who skip down south, 90% of them are skipping a half-ounce jig. That is a half-ounce jig for a jig is the go-to skipping bait. So I went against the grain. So when I learned to skip, the half-ounce jig is supposedly the easiest bait to learn to skip with.
I can't do it.
Well, because you learn from me and learn from using the baits I use. Um, I went against the grain. So what I do down south, if I go down and fish Lake of the Ozarks, or I go down and fish Kentucky Lake, or any of the other good dock lakes down south, what I'm doing is considered finesse fishing because I learned to skip docks with a 3/8 ounce jig, which all the guys down south will tell you is the hardest jig to skip. Now, to me, I can't skip a half-ounce jig either, but it's because I've been doing it so long,
The
and
muscle
muscle
memory.
memory is everything in skipping. So let's
Yeah.
get back to mechanics, or let's get to start this with the mechanics and the basics. Muscle memory is everything when you're skipping. And it's sidearm, not quite as much. Sidearm for beginners is probably easier. You can stay a little bit farther away from the dock. Um, how you learned was the hard way, and that's
Yeah.
an underhand pitch skip, which is very hard to master. To be able to get that bait to skip 20 some feet, skipping it up, pitching it underhand like you're pitching a bait to the shoreline.
Yeah.
Um, but once
But
you get
once you
that muscle
master it, that's
memory,
the easiest one to have accuracy with once you master it.
correct. So now what I did is, and this is a little secret for everybody. If you take a 3/8 ounce jig, I can make that 3/8 ounce jig fall at almost the same fall rate as a half-ounce jig.
Yeah.
I can also make it fall as slow as a quarter-ounce jig. It's
Yeah.
all in the trailer that you use and what you put on it. It depends on how much skirt material. If you even flare your weed guard out, can slow it down or speed it up. So
Yep.
I tune my jig. I always skip with a 3/8 ounce jig because it always acts the same way as far as skipping and casting. But the
Yep.
fall rate will be totally different depending what I have on for a trailer. Same thing when I skip a Texas rig. What weight do I use? 3/8
3/8.
ounce because it skips the same way my jig does. So my release point's the same and it acts the same. And then you
Yep.
adjust everything else on what bait you have on. Big thing is, and I know you have different thoughts on this too, but I've helped several people that I've taught to skip. Um, Mechanics and technique are everything. To me, I'm shorter. Me and you are
Yep.
close to the same height. I tried learning to skip. My old partner, Kerry, he skipped with a 7 foot rod, but he's also like 6'1".
Yep.
My
We're sawed
other
off little bastards.
right. My other team partner that I still fish some with, he's like 6'3". Well, he can skip with a 7'1", 7'2".
Yep.
I did have a friend, a guy in the club that was having a hard time skipping, and I told him the secret. And he's a tall guy. He's 6 foot, and I told him go to a 6'10" rod.
Yep.
He picked up a 6'10" and he immediately started being able to skip. To me, the best skipping rod on the market, if you want to get set up for it, is a Falcon 6'10" head turner. It's a
Yep.
heavy action, heavy, extra fast. It it's just the to me the perfect rod for skipping, and you got the perfect amount of backbone to get them out.
And this is another place where me and him kind of butt heads a little bit. Granted, I use a 6'10", but I often wonder if it wouldn't be easier for as short as I am to do it with a 6'8". I got a hard time spending the money on a what if, but I
And
know like my BFS rod is shorter. It is not a 6'10", and I can skip with that thing like you would not freaking believe.
a lot of that, though, it all depends on the weight of the bait and the action in the line. So I've tried with like a 6'6". The thing is, when I talk about mechanics and muscle memory, you do not get the pendulum out of a 6'8" or a 6'6" that you get out of a 6'10". A 6'10", you still get the pendulum motion, but it's shorter. My problem is if I try to skip with a 7 foot or longer, when I skip to keep my bait low, the tip of the rod hits the water when I
Yeah.
bring it down to move forward. And that makes a drag, and then your bait digs in and you're done. That
Right.
cast was wasted. So to me, a 6'10" is perfect. Play around with it. I mean, by all means, there's a lot of guys out there. Andy Montgomery, which is probably the best dock skipper in the world, uses a 7'2", but he
Right.
also uses a 6'10". He's got a
Yeah.
6'10" and a 7'2" on the deck. From my understanding, all of his sidearm skipping is done with a 7'2", and when he pitch skips, he grabs the 6'10". So
Yeah, and the shortness is really comes into play when you're underhand skipping, because when you're doing it right, that rod tip should almost skim right above the water to get that arc right when you release the bait from your hand, because that bait should just float and then hit the water and just dance across it.
the
That
bit
rod tip is everything.
and your point, the point that you want the jig to hit is at the point right under what you're trying to get under. So if your dock edge is here, you want your jig to hit right below that, because then you clear that and then it can skip up and get to where you want it to get, because it's going to come up. And the other thing, when
Yeah.
you skip, you want to keep your rod low and it's all on your release point. And then as soon as it goes, when it starts skipping, you raise your rod tip. That way it slows the momentum down and lets the bait slide up under and gives it line.
And it sounds freaking crazy, and I don't know how to explain it. But between thumbing the spool and controlling your rod tip, you can kind of change a skip mid skip.
Oh
As
yeah,
dumb as that
definitely.
sounds, you have so much more control once you're in tune with it than you would ever
Correct.
believe. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to curve it around a corner,
Oh yeah,
but
you can. You can
well,
curve it. You can curve it around
yeah,
dock post. You can curve it around dock post. I've curved it around fronts of
but I
boats to
mean, you're
get
not going to
in the
make a
front.
90-degree turn without freaking wrapping it around something. But you have a lot more control after that bait flies than you would believe once you know what you're doing.
Correct. Correct.
Um, So we'll kind of finish up on this wide docks hold bass.
Oh, sorry.
Um, no, you're good. You're good. What makes one dock better than another? I mean, typically, I know that's a hard question, but
Normally, it's one of two things. It's either depth or amount of shade. They're the two most important things. You want to find what depth they want to be at, and then you normally want to find the docks with the most shade at that depth. Them are normally your key factors.
and the last one we'll do in here is do floating docks in your opinion fish differently than permanent docks?
Absolutely, absolutely. Floating docks, obviously, you once in a while you'll have room between floats that you can
Yep.
put a bait, which is normally 2 inches wide. So I don't do it as a beginner because you're going to be smacking a lot of floats and getting a lot of birds' nests.
Yep.
You got to be able to put it in a 2 inch slide to get it to go in there. Um, so a lot of times when I'll do them, it's more running a bait down the edges. But the key there is you have to remember, yes, it's a floating dock, it's on a float, but it's still 8 inches to a foot and a half underwater.
Right.
So you got to remember, if you throw your bait out and you reel it 3 inches under the water alongside the dock, a fish under the dock can't see it anyways.
No.
So you got to be below the float so that they can see it. The other thing is fishing floating docks. A lot of times, what I'll do is throw up alongside the dock, and I always use fluorocarbon line. So I let my line sink, move around to the other side of the dock. Now my line went under the dock. I can pull my bait under the dock, under the float.
Yep.
It's time
Uh,
consuming, but it'll pick you up a big fish.
well, and that's another thing too. I mean, especially on floating docks where you don't have to worry so much about hanging up on anything. That's where tuning a spinner bait can come in handy. Tuning a crankbait can come in handy. A square bill, whatever, because you can tweak them to run to the left or the right. I mean, I literally have heard of guys that had two spinner baits or two crankbaits on the deck of their boat, one tuned to run left, one tuned to run right, and they used one
It's
on each side of the
even
dock.
correct, and it's huge with the buzz bait too. You can
Yep.
tune, so you got three different buzz baits on your deck. One runs right, one runs left, and one runs straight.
Yep.
All the best dock skippers that I know that skip with buzz baits, that's how they're set up. Because you
Yep.
want that blade to run into the posts.
Right.
So
Yeah, sometimes you do want to hit shit on the dock under the
definitely
water. You don't want to smack it putting it in, because that's
correct.
another thing too that's really hard to understand and learn with skipping docks. You you don't necessarily want the splashing noise, especially at the end of the cast. Sometimes you want to drop it in there stealthy as shit. You're trying
Correct.
to make them think whatever that was way up there and working its way down. It's more natural, but there are times where you want that sploosh to draw their attention.
Well, and it's not so much the sploosh, and I will let everybody in on a little secret. A lot of times, even when I'm fishing a bank
Yep.
and there's nothing to get under, I'll
I'll still
skip
skip.
I'll skip my jig because it's that across the water that gets their attention, and then something falls in front of their face.
Yeah, because it's very similar to the same noise a fleeing bait fish makes
Correct.
or a bluegill when they're on the surface struggling.
Exactly. So that's a
Now
that's a huge secret. There is the skipping even when you don't have to skip. A lot of docks, a lot of times you might have a foot and a half and you could cast under it,
right.
but I'll still skip it in because a lot of times that skipping noise is what gets their attention before the bait even gets there.
Yeah, get some looking.
Correct.
Now we'll kind of touch on some, the seasonal dock fishing stuff. Spring, pre-spawn fish using docks, spawning fish. Fish do spawn around docks. I've seen beds on
Definitely.
freaking dock posts and stuff, and then bluegill beds. Bluegills bed in similar areas to bass. You get to summer shade and oxygen, and deep water docks really play. And in fall, it's chasing bait and the docks around transition areas.
Right.
What is your favorite season to fish docks? And I know that this is kind of a dumb question because you do it all year, but
I like them all, but my favorite is post spawn. Simply like I said, because you still have 90% of the bass are 5 feet of water or less.
yeah,
So normally the month of June into early July is probably my favorite. And then you turn around again into late fall when a majority of the fish will pull up shallow and they'll get on them shallower docks or just get on the docks in general because the bait fish are there and they'll be there feeding. So post
yeah.
spawn and fall.
How does your approach change throughout the year? Or does it really?
Post spawn, a lot of times, like I said, it seems like post spawn, you get a lot more chatterbait bites going where you don't have to work your bait real slow. And I think it's not just strictly the season. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with the fish haven't been as pressured as much yet under the docks. It seems like a lot of people don't really start fishing docks until the heat of the summer, July, August, strictly for the shade factor. When they're better way earlier than that. So I
Yeah,
think it's a combination. They haven't been pressured. They're feeding heavily because they just got done spawning. So they got to recoup all that energy and stuff that they spent spawning. So they're looking to feed up heavy, and docks are a great place to do that, especially if you're on a lake that does not have a lot of grass. That makes docks even better. Um, so I think you can get a moving bait bite a lot better in post spawn than what you can later in the summer.
yeah. Now we'll kind of move on. We kind of covered this one already. The art of skipping. Um, I'm gonna kind of
The-
skim this because we went through most of it.
well, I'll go through my setup. So I already did the rod. So
Yeah,
90%, 99% of the time, I'm using a Falcon Expert or Lowrider 610 head turner, which is a heavy action, extra fast. Um, and then for a reel, I'm torn. I use a few different ones. The only reason the one reel is my favorite is simply because it only holds 50 yards of line, and that is the Lose Skip and Pitch. And I'm not sponsored by Lose, but I like the Lose Skip and Pitch reel. Andy Montgomery designed it for skipping docks, so it's a very shallow spool. The magnetics and the braking are set up for skipping, and it only holds 50 yards of line. So I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you think me or Andy Montgomery or any of the guys that skip all the time and have made most of their fishing money doing it, don't get backlashes. They're lying to you, and you're nuts, because it seems like even when I'm going down a row of docks, whenever I get a distance in between docks where I'm going more than 20, 30 feet, I just turn and fire a long cast out to the
yep.
middle of the lake and reel my bait in to tighten the line back up on the spool. Every pitch you make, you're loosening a little bit more line up on your reel.
And that's what
Line,
kills you.
correct. Line conditioner is your best friend.
Yep.
If you do not use line conditioner, I mean, I spool up with P line tactical 20-pound braid or 20-pound fluorocarbon is that's all I use for skipping docks is 20-pound tactical P line. And I will tell you, you can get an extra week or two out of that line if right away in the morning when you pull your rods out, you take Real Magic or KVD had a line conditioner out there. Any of the good line conditioners work. When I pull my reel out right away in the morning, I take Real Magic, I put 2 squirts on the whole spool, set it on my deck. When I get to where I'm going to start fishing, I make a long cast with it, pinch the line in my fingers, reel it back in. It tightens it up on the spool and it conditions all that line, and it's as straight as an arrow. You don't have all
Yeah.
them curly cues, and which P-line tactical will be really good for probably a month. You won't see any kinks in your line or curly cues. It'll cast great. After about a month, I start conditioning it, and I will normally get maybe another month out of it. Skipping is really hard on line, and half the time you end up by that time you're cut down to your 50 yards is probably 30 anyways from changing baits or breaking off or
Yeah.
retying because when you're fishing docks, if you catch a 3 pounder under a dock, I can guarantee you better retie that line because
Yeah.
somewhere he rubbed on a dock post, somewhere he did something. You better check the bottom 20 feet of your line for nicks, cut it off, and retie it.
Oh, and that's another thing too. I think a lot of guys don't really think about knots for skipping docks. All I tie is a Palomar or a double Palomar.
Correct.
It doesn't slip. I
No.
mean, if you're tying grandpa's freaking overhand fishing knot, whatever bullshit granddad taught you, you're gonna break off. It is what
Yeah.
it is.
A,
There
a
are only
double
a
improved
handful.
a double improved clinch is okay. I mean, if that's more comfortable for you, there's a couple other knots out there that are really good. But to me, I'm retying sometimes 30, 40 times a day. I
And
can
you
tie
can
a
tie a
Palomar knot
Palomar. Yep,
in
2
5 seconds, 10
seconds.
seconds, I'm
Yeah.
done. Right. And it's not going to break and it holds up really good. A lot of people say it does not hold up on fluorocarbon. As long as you wet your knot before you pull it tight and you watch your knot as you pull it and don't be in too big of a hurry, you're fine with a Palomar knot.
And I'll tell you, I don't even do that. I just tighten
Mm.
my knot slow and make sure you're not causing heat and friction when you're doing it. Keep an eye on it and hold it in the right place. I mean, sometimes I'll remember to spit on it, but
That's just a habit from 35 years of just wetting the line when you pull it tight and
I,
snip.
I, uh, for as much time as I have spent fishing, everybody who knows me knows this. I have a ridiculous phobia of needles and pointy things. The more I can keep pointy shit away from my face, the happier I am. And normally, when you're tying a knot right tight to a bait like that, that hook's getting awful close to your cheek.
Well, yeah.
So, I
And
mean,
and I cut my knot. I cut my knot. I always leave a 16th to an eighth of an inch of tag, just so if when you set the hook on a fish, it pulls a little bit,
yeah,
your knot isn't getting pulled out.
right. And another thing too, you touched on it with the fluorocarbon thing, P line, Sunline,
Yeah.
Suffix. I don't care what brand you're using. Line is expendable. I don't even care what
Yes.
style. Mono, copolymer, braided line. The new braided lines, unfortunately, are braided fluorocarbons. So they also have a very short shelf life compared to original braid.
Correct.
Um,
P lines is not the endurance and stuff is still the 8 strand braid, but
yeah, no, the ones I'm talking like the new Daiwa X braid is
yep.
braided fluorocarbon.
Correct.
Your fancy Sunline like the sinking, pretty much any of their oddball does weird shit braids,
It's
they're braided
fluorocarbon.
fluorocarbon.
Yep.
It
And
degrades in sunlight and over time.
yep, you're gonna have to change it. It's not gonna last. That kind of braid you can't put on and like my P line braid, my no fade. I run the no fade braid now, 65 pound for almost everything that I use braided line on. And I literally don't change line until I've cut it down to
Yeah,
where I don't have enough left to make a 100-yard cast with a or 70-yard cast with a freaking frog. And then I
right.
cut it off and replace it. Sometimes it's a couple, 2, 3 years.
Yeah. But
Sorry.
I mean, if you're running fluorocarbon, you got to get used to the fact that it is expendable. You're going to get 2 months to a month out of it, depending whether you use line conditioner. To me, once it starts getting really bad memory, I respool.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, it's a fact of life. It is what it is, and
Right.
that's one thing you got to look at too. If you're breaking off a lot of fish, change your damn line. I don't care if you're throwing 20 or 17. It gets brittle. It is what it is. It's a fact of
Yep.
life.
Yep.
Um,
And the other thing is too, getting back to, it's a good point. Fluorocarbon is very expensive, and yes, I am sponsored by P Line, um, but I get 2,000 yard spools of tactical for a reason, because you are respooling. I'll go through a 2,000 yard spool a year on 4 skipping reels.
Yep.
Um, Now I had mentioned the lose skipping reel because it only holds 50 yards of line. Another trick for guys out there that my other reel of choice that I use for skipping is the Daiwa Tatula. Now, obviously, that reel holds a lot more than 50 yards.
Yeah.
So what I do when I buy a new reel and I'm going to set it up for skipping, and actually I do it with almost all of my reels now, because 50 yards of line, other than a crankbait or a jerk bait or something like that, you're not going to cast. If you're using fluorocarbon on it, you're probably not casting more than 50 yards, other than a crankbait or a jerk bait.
Yeah.
So I'll spool up that brand new reel with old, P-line CCX copolymer line. I'll spool it up till it's full. And then I will literally take and pull. I know a long pull is a yard. I'll pull 50 yards of that line back off, cut it, and then I will. And here's a trick for all you guys out there that are just getting started. When you do that, and you're to 50 yards, but you've probably got another 70 yards of that cheaper line on your spool. Reel your line up until you're not is at your first guide, the first guide from the reel. Take a piece of electric tape. Take the electric tape and start it on the spool and reel the tape up to the knot. And one
Yep.
turn past your knot, cut the tape off. Now spool your 50 yards of line on. Now that Tatula reel is kind of like the skip and pitch reel. If you do get a bad bird's nest, the farthest it can go is 50 yards.
Yep. You're
And
not picking out a whole spool.
correct. You pull it down to the electric tape. Now everything's out. You wind it back on. You're good to go.
That's one thing I'll say, going back to my BFS setup for skipping and stuff. I run 15-pound braid on there. Been
Yep.
dabbling a little bit with the new Daiwa X braid stuff. When you poof a reel skipping with frickin' braid, you poof a reel. I mean,
Right.
you might as well get out a knife and cut it off. I
Yeah.
literally carry 2 spools with me. I
Braided line, when you get a bird's nest, it's not impossible to get out. The nice thing with braided line is when you kink it, it's still okay. So when you're
yeah,
picking it out and you get kinks in it, it's still okay. Fluorocarbon line, if you're picking out a bird's nest and you get a kink in it, it's probably going to break there, because
yeah,
fluorocarbon is not meant to be kinked. Another thing is also with that's the nice thing with that tape on there, is you pull that 50 yards out, you can wind it back on and keep the line straight. You're not getting as big of a mess. But braided
yeah.
line, yeah, it's a lot of times if you bird's nest a braided reel, you're cutting it off and redoing it. I mean, there's not much around that.
And that's one thing too, kind of going back to the rod and reel setup that I will stress with a skipping setup. You can't cheap out on the reel.
No,
I mean, I guess you can if you really want to, but you're gonna freaking hate yourself. You want
yeah,
something you can tune exactly how you need it. And the other thing you got to keep in mind too, the settings you have for skipping might not flip the best. Doing an over, a pendulum flip cast. Sometimes you're locked out, especially when you're learning.
right. Right.
You've
You're
got
gonna have your
shit,
spool tighter when you're learning.
like now, and it's even different freaking rod and reel and bait to bait. On my jig
Yep.
skipping setup, I've got some braking on. It is what it is. There's no shame in that. And I could have 2 of the exact same model reel, and one of them might need to be tuned different. It's just a fact of what it is. But now on my BFS setup that I skip Syncos on, I don't have any brakes on. And that is 100% thumb control. That's how I can get it to skip the
Yep.
best. But that's years of doing it, and that's just knowing the reel.
And I'll be honest with everybody, like a skip and pitch reel, they've got on the magnetics on the loose skip and pitch, it's got on the magnetic dial all the way on So your brake at maximum is the skipping setting.
Yep.
So all them reels, I have the magnetic braking at maximum, and then I tune it with the spool knob. Now
Yep.
Daiwas are different. Daiwas, they want you to pretty much, they say with the Tatulas, you don't turn the spool control at all, and you do it all with the
Bullshit.
magnetics. Correct. Don't believe that one at all. But I will say, once you get good at it, I can take my skipping rod and turn on and fire a jig as far as as far as you can with any other rod and not get a backlash. But that's thumb memory and bait
Yep.
control and knowing how to do it.
Well, and after years of doing it too, I can take a brand new reel out of the box, spool it up, tie a 3/8 ounce jig on it, set my tension knob, and hit the button and watch how it drops 2 or 3 times, and know without a shadow of a doubt where the
It's
spool
right.
tension needs to be.
Yep.
And then it's just a matter of playing with the magnetics.
Yep.
So the next one I want to touch on: what is the biggest mistake beginners make when they're learning to fish docks, when they're learning to skip?
The biggest mistake I can tell you that people make when you're going down a line of docks, and even after you've been doing it as long as I do, I will still make this mistake once in a while. The best advice I can give somebody in learning to skip is your bait will always go where you're looking. If you have any hand-eye coordination at all, that bait will go where you're looking. The biggest mistake is people going down a row of docks will look at what they don't want to hit. They'll see that back of that pontoon and, oh, I don't want to hit that, and dong, and they'll hit it every single time because they're looking at it. You want to look where you want the bait to go. And now once you've been doing it a long time, and if you're not really trying to put it in a tight spot, a lot of times I'll catch myself skipping under a dock looking at the next spot
Yeah.
where I want to throw. But when you're starting out, you definitely do not want to do that. You want to keep your eye focused where you want that bait to go.
What it
And
really
that's what you
reminds me of is intuitive shooting with a recurve. It is the exact same
correct.
concept.
Correct. Or shooting
For
with a
all the
shotgun.
hundreds. Yeah. Yes.
Same thing.
I mean, it's muscle memory and keeping your eye on the freaking target.
Yep. Hand-eye coordination is everything in it.
Yeah.
And the other
Now,
thing is too is people, I think people starting out do not spend the time on the regular mechanics. So learning that hand-eye coordination and learning those mechanics is when you're first getting started. And I taught you you and both your brothers this. You go out in the yard and you start with an ice cream pail or a 5-gallon bucket, and you put it
yeah.
20 feet away, and you practice until every time you can drop that jig in that bucket. Then you might move that bucket out. What I normally would do with you guys, or what I even did when I practiced in the winter. I mean, we get the winters off. We don't get to go and fish. So a lot of times when I was younger, all winter I would go out in the freaking snow and set Dixie cups up and solo cups. And so the best thing I can do is tell you, and you might be really good enough that you can start with an ice cream pail at 25, 30 feet. Then go to a Dixie cup or a red solo cup. Then go to a Dixie cup. When you can hit that every time at 20, 30 feet, move it out 35, 40 feet, start with the bigger object and keep moving it smaller.
Right.
Because that teaches you hand-eye coordination, which is what will help you when you go to skip. If you're not proficient at regular casting first, skipping is going to be really hard.
And I remember as a kid, not understanding and absolutely hating sitting out there for hours doing that. But I'm so thankful for it now because even after 10 years away from not fishing at all, when I picked a rod back up, I still had the muscle memory and the hand eye coordination. I
Mm-hmm.
could spike you between the eyes with a 3-ounce jig at 50 feet and not even freaking miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanics are important. It's no different than any other sport out there. If you don't do the groundwork and put in the time, you can't expect to do good.
No,
Um,
and a prime example of muscle memory. I just had shoulder surgery 2 years ago, and last year was very hard because your shoulders were probably that in your elbow, but your shoulder is probably 40% of your muscle memory when you're skipping or even casting.
Yep.
And when you have surgery on something like that, you got to learn them muscles all over again. I mean, I had my bicep moved and all that stuff comes into play. So it took me a while to get that memory built into those muscles from not doing it and being changed.
Eh, And it is muscles and ligaments and joints being moved in ways that probably aren't totally natural or normal, I guess. I mean, I have issues. If we have a really dock heavy summer, I end up with tennis elbow by the end of the year.
Oh,
And then I
I do
have
too.
all winter to try to nurse it back. And hopefully by spring, I'm good enough again. But, you
I
know,
go to the chiropractor once a month all summer just to keep my tennis elbow out. Because
right.
otherwise I have it all the time if I don't go and get it popped and put in place and stuff. And luckily I guess I don't know how, but I haven't had any wrist issues. I mean, 90% of pitch skipping,
That's all
90% of
your
that is your
wrist.
wrist. I mean, you're
Yeah.
not, you're moving your elbow a little bit, but it's mainly this motion right here is what's doing all your work.
Luckily, I've been keeping that bad boy limber since I was freaking 12 years old. Sorry,
The
that was a
other thing
bad
is
joke.
too, and it comes down to the same mechanics when you're casting, and a lot of people aren't taught this when they first start casting. Everybody thinks when you cast, you have your thumb pointed straight up and you cast like this, and
Nope.
that is incorrect. You want
Sideways.
it sideways and cast like that. And skipping is that same motion. Your reel is sideways. You want to look at it as when you finish, your fingers should be pointing straight up.
Yeah.
If your finger is pointing straight up and your thumb is right below it, that's the proper position to be casting with.
Yeah. And
Same
if
when
you
I
really want,
sidearm. Same when I sidearm. It's all
yeah.
that thumb is pointed where I want it to go.
Well, and if you really want to test it, go tie on a frog rod once and cast straight on and cast pitching your, straight on and
Yep.
then pitching your wrist to the side and see how many more feet you get out of that cast when you're kicking to the side a little bit.
Well,
It's
not
all
only
the
how many
difference in
more
the world.
feet, but how accurate you are. Your
Yes.
accuracy will change completely.
Now, frogs are hard no matter what because them little bastards catch wind and fight the whole way where they're going. But
Right.
all these things tie together. It's all mechanics that all play.
Correct.
Now we'll kind of touch on dock positioning and boat control. A lot of the things that really affect when you're fishing at a dock is the managing the wind, sun angles, how you want to approach the dock. When I look at a dock, I have it broke out how I'm gonna hit when I'm at this angle, the parts I'm gonna hit when I'm in front of it, and the parts I'm gonna hit on the backside. Like that's just all things you learn. And then the other thing is staying far enough off it. You're not spooking fish, not whatever.
Right.
So I guess starting out, how close is too close?
All depends on water clarity. If you've got pretty stained water, I've literally caught them, you know, 5 feet from the boat. I don't like to get that close. It all depends on how tight of areas you're trying to put boats or put baits. Now, if I'm predominantly skipping pontoons, for instance, I will stay a little bit closer because a lot of it you're putting it between a motor and a pontoon, and you a lot of times only have 8-10 inches to get
Yeah,
that bait through, and you want to hit that gap, and you're normally trying to get to the front of it, so you got to have a little momentum with it. So then I'll stay a little bit closer.
right.
um Now if you're right-handed, some more secrets. If you're right-handed, you normally want to fish docks from left to right, so you want the shore to your left, because
Yeah,
if you're for me, for pitch skipping, it really doesn't matter. I can do it from any angle. But say you're going down a row of docks and you want to be throwing under the walkway also, you can wait till you get past the dock, and then you can turn, and right-handed, you're making the proper
yeah,
angle to sidearm skip under the walkway or under that end of the dock or under the dock to the front of the boat lift. That's a lot of times the big spot is where the tight corner of the boat lift meets the dock. From the other side, you can't get to that spot. But once you get past the dock, you can throw back. And that's where knowing how to sidearm and pitch skip is important.
Yeah.
And it all depends. So if I know it's clearer water, the fish are a little spooky, maybe they're a little more pressured, I will try to keep my boat farther from the dock, and then I will roll cast, skip the bait underhand, under the dock. That way I
Yeah.
can stay farther away. If they're not spooky, it's dark water, or it's got a lot of grass, say the dock's got a lot of grass around them. And this is another thing also for people to realize, that a lot of people think if docks are weed choked, they're not any good. There's no grass growing under the dock because there's
Right.
shade. Grass can't grow because there's no sunlight. So a lot of times if you're fishing docks like that, you have to get closer so you can pitch and pendulum it under the dock. Otherwise your bait's going to hit grass and it's going to dig in and you're not going to skip anyways. But if you can get
Right.
under that dock, they can be laying on the edge of the dock, the edge of the grass, just inside the dock.
And we kind of touched on it before a little bit. Some of the things that have really, really changed boat positioning and handling, and I get not everybody's got it. Power poles and spot lock. Granted, now you got to be careful with spot lock around docks, because I don't know about you guys, but my Minn Kota tries to kill me on a regular freaking basis. It wants to destroy my boat and throw me from it. I've made that mistake a lot. But if you're staying out farther when you don't have to worry about it thinking for itself and trying to ram you into the dock, it can be a really handy way in the wind to hold you off a dock.
Correct.
Um,
If you're fishing into the wind, and that's when I will change my whole, what I said, left to right. For a right-handed person, you only want to go left to right. That way you're throwing over the trolling motor, not throwing over your windshield and breaking your windshield and possibly hitting your dash graph, all that kind of stuff. That's the common way to do it. Now, the only time I will go against that is if I'm fishing and it's windy, then I will go into the wind no matter what. Unless I'm fishing shallow enough docks that I can put my poles down and they're going to reach
yeah.
wherever I'm at. Then I use my power poles a lot.
Yeah, and that's another one I want to touch on. Probably another thing I probably shouldn't be saying, but one of my big tricks with power poles, a lot of times I will back in along, between two docks,
Yep.
put the frickin' ass of my trolling motor right in the sand and pull down and fish
Yep.
them backwards, because nobody
Correct.
ever does that.
Correct.
They don't expect a bait to be coming from that way.
Correct. Yep, that's a very valid one. I do that a lot. I'll go, and either way, it's a lot of times I'll just nose up into the dock and fish backwards also. But I mean, either way, whatever works. And our docks, and we don't normally have as many docks on our lakes here, at least up here, that are as deep as what they are down south. So I know if you go to like Lake of the Ozarks or Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, if you're gonna fish docks, 90% of them are floating docks, but the
Right.
walkways are what's key. So there, you're maneuvering your boat between docks where you may only be 2 feet wider than your boat, and you're nosing in between the docks to fish the walkways, and then you got to back your boat straight out.
Well, and that's another thing we've kind of missed on a little bit that I think really needs to be talked about. When you're skipping docks, you are throwing that jig, Cinco, whatever, into places you have no right throwing it into. You are throwing
Correct.
over cables. You are skipping a bait under an inch of dock off the water.
Yep.
You get hung up on rungs all the time. When we fish boat lifts, we're throwing it right in the middle of the boat lift and swimming it over the edge. Like, your odds of
Yep.
getting hung up are pretty good. And it's knowing how to slowly bring it out and how to work that jig over top of it so you're not hanging up on everything.
Correct. The best thing I could tell somebody is if you know somebody, or you can go to a lake early in the year before they got the boat lifts in, but they don't have boats on them yet. Go down that stretch and throw your jig into the middle of it and work it so you know what everything feels like,
Yeah.
because you can crawl it through pretty much everything. The only thing that will ever almost always get you is cables and
Yeah.
chains, or
Yeah.
rope,
And
or rope hanging.
ropes.
Ropes are the worst because even if you snag up and you go in to get it, you're not getting it off with your rod tip. You literally got to go to the rope and push the rope together to get the hook out of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
rope is the sickest joke a homeowner can do on a dock.
Oh
I
yeah, and
absolutely hate that.
I know of a couple lakes where homeowners take ropes, and every 10 inches they hang a 2 foot rope off the end of their dock to keep people from fishing them.
Yeah, which never stops us. I mean,
No, no, but
at that point, if
they
you're
do
doing
it
it on purpose, you can catch a hook. I don't give a shit.
right. I mean, and some of that stuff. Like I was on a lake one time. I fished a tournament, and 90% of the docks on this lake were the docks that had two chains. So they cross in the middle under the dock. So one end goes to the wheel, the other end goes to the pole on the other side. Well, the fish wanted to be behind the chains,
Yeah.
looking out and feeding out. Well, I figured that out because I threw over a chain and got bit and broke off. So the next dock I went to, I thought, okay, well, I nosed my boat in and cast behind the chains. They wouldn't touch it. You had to throw the bait over the chain for them to bite it, or they wouldn't touch it.
All
And I
right.
broke off 5 or 6 fish that day because
Yeah.
that's the only way they'd hit it. But the rule of thumb that I go to is put a bait where they're going to bite it and worry about getting them out after you get the bite.
Yeah. Because you ain't getting them out if you ain't even making the cast. I mean,
Correct.
like I said, dock fishing is a game of expendables. It is what it is.
It is.
Um, Now we'll kind of touch on some more advanced stuff, and I know you and I have both been kind of playing around with this a little bit. I mean, we'll talk about the great white devil here, forward facing sonar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in all honesty, now not everywhere, super shallow docks, it's not quite as useful. But whether you're scanning a dock in forward or running around with panoramic, I mean, you can at times see the fish on the docks.
Absolutely.
But
Deeper docks especially.
yes.
But shallow ones, if I know I'm going to be fishing docks in less than 3 feet of water all day, my live scope is on perspective, and yes, you can see the fish swimming around under the dock.
Yeah. But that does not mean that I will not fish a dock that I don't see fish on
Oh,
because you can't
absolutely.
all if
They
they're
could be
belly
hiding
to the
behind a
bottom, you
tire,
might not see them.
right? Or they could be hiding behind a tire. They love the tires, the wheels that are on most docks when they wheel them in. That's one of the key spots is behind the tire because they can nose up in behind their shade and it's an ambush point.
Now, I also do believe there are times when electronics in general hurt shallow and dock fishing. I mean, those fish are hearing the click of your sonar. They're
Yep.
feeling it.
Yep.
There's no arguing it at this point. Fish are adapting. It's God's way of keeping us in line. It is what it is. And I think as time goes on, eventually we are going to see a movement of people, and there are guys that do it already, but that turn the ping off.
Yep. Turn your sonar off. I've run into situations and I know I'm going to do it more this year. If I know I'm going to be fishing docks all day and I'm going to be fishing less than 5 feet of water, and I know I'm not going to be getting into areas where I'm going to be, and you're normally moving slow enough. If your trolling motor does bottom out, you're not going to hurt anything.
Right.
So I know I'm going to a lot more this year turn all my sonars off. Just turn the ping off. You can leave the screen on if you want for your GPS or whatever, but my sonars will be turned off just because I know
Yeah.
it's making a difference.
I'm in the honeymoon phase yet with my new boat. I'm babying it and taking care of it. I've already scratched the shit out of it. I mean, it's a tool. It is. At the end of the
It is.
day, and life is so much easier when you look at things for what they are. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. It, and by the end of this summer, I'll be to the point where it's the same thing. I'll be less worried about dinging and scratching shit. I'll just use it for what it is. Um, but yeah, definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah,
You know,
you definitely want to learn your bolt control, and you definitely want to learn you can wiggle your way through some pretty tight stuff on docks. and
Yeah.
never touch anything. I mean, you watch some of the pros sometimes. I mean, I think I get close to docks, and these guys literally, when they go around the corner, there you couldn't stick a piece of paper between their boat and the dock post, and they never touch it. And
Yeah.
they're not even looking. They just know when they get to that point they can turn.
Well, and on steel and wood docks and stuff like that, I mean, again, avoid trying to run into people's shit. But at the end of the day,
Correct.
you're going to do more damage to your boat than you're going to do to that dock as long as you're
Oh
not
yeah.
full tilt pile driving into it like a jackass.
The big one that I see is people, and I'm very careful with it because yes, my boat is my boat and it's a tool, but my electronics are very expensive. And you'll see a lot of guys going up to get a bait off a dock or something. They got a
Yeah.
360 and a live scope on, and they just pile into the end of the dock with a 360 and then wonder a week later, well, why is my 360 not working? Well,
Right.
probably because you've been slamming it off docks all week.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The electronics are fine equipment. That's something you be careful with. It's like a caliper or something along those lines.
Correct. And
But
with jigs and throwing jigs and tungsten with uh Texas rigs and stuff all the time, you definitely want to kind of pay attention where you want to line up your hook sets so that you know that jig's not going to come back and smoke your $4,000 graph and put a big crack in the screen. And also when you're fishing docks, you always, and to me it's second nature, I guess. But I did have a friend um a year ago now that didn't spend a lot of time dock fishing and was getting on a really good dock bite on a big tournament. And he called me and he said, "What am I doing wrong?" He said, "What do you do?" He said, "I broke so many fish off today." He said, or I wasn't setting the hook hard because it was way up under a dock. How do you do it?" And I'm like, whenever I make a cast, whenever I make a skip, I look at the angle and know what I'm going to have to do.
yeah,
So if it's under a pontoon, most of the time you can set straight up or to the side because the angle, you're not going to hit anything that's going to cut your line. Now, under a dock, if you skip way up under a dock and you set the hook straight up, you're going to pull that line across the bottom middle of that dock and risk
yeah,
breaking off. At that point, you want to find your angle so you know which angle to sweep your rod and normally set the rod across your chest and get a good hook set that way.
yeah. If you don't have bruises on your ribs when you're dock fishing, you're not doing it right.
No.
Because the worst feeling in the world is when your rod butt slips between two ribs and separates them
Yeah.
a little bit. That
Yep.
shit'll bring you to your knees. But you know you
Wow.
had one hell of a hook set when you did it.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
we'll kind of touch. I just got some like rapid fire random stuff here.
Okay.
Um, best dock fishing lake in Wisconsin.
Big Green.
Ooh, that's a weird choice.
One of them. I mean, there's a lot of good ones, but well, actually, I'll Winneconne.
Yeah,
Winneconne is
yeah,
one of my
that's
favorites.
I would I'd have to say squirrel.
Mm,
Um
shame on you.
that's the first time I ever kicked dad's ass dock fishing. That lake's kind of my baby now.
We'll see.
Uh
Couple weeks.
oh, I'm defending the title this year.
Okay.
What's your favorite dock jig?
TNT tackle skipping jig. I helped design it. It's the bomb.
Yeah, that's a hard one to deny there. That the biggest thing with that is the archy style head. I mean, yes, you
Correct.
can skip other shapes. I will skip finesse jigs with the ball head, but
Oh
the
yeah.
key thing with that archy headed jig is the way the bottom is like a it's like skipping a rock. It's got that shape.
Well, there's two things about it. It's the archy shape, but it's also the horizontal line tie.
Yes.
And the lead is poured partially over the line tie, so your line can't go off center. So
Yeah.
if you don't have that and you skip a lot, a lot of times what'll happen is even with a
Yeah,
horizontal
it'll
line tie,
be
the line will be over all the way against the lead on one side. So when you go to pick it up, it's turning the jig sideways all the time.
yeah,
Where with the TNT jig, the minute it gets in there, the line is straight. You're getting a straight pull on your jig.
yeah. Braid or fluorocarbon. I mean, this one's pretty.
Fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon.
Yeah,
I hate skipping with braid. Other than a frog. If I'm skipping a frog, then it's braid, but
spinning rod or bait caster.
bait caster.
Yeah, I can't do shit with a spinning rod. That's
I'll throw a Senko on it, but that's as far as I go.
what's your biggest dock bass?
6'2".
Well, that's it's pretty respectable. I couldn't
Out
even
of
tell
big
you.
out of big on big green.
I hate to admit it. I really don't keep track of that stuff. We had this conversation last year. I can tell you the biggest fish I've caught in memory, but I couldn't tell you the actual biggest fish I've ever caught. I genuinely, I don't know. What would you say is the most underrated feature of a dock to fish?
Ladders.
Yeah,
The ladders on the side of the docks that go into the water, you climb up onto the dock. Not the staircase if they got one by shore, but an actual ladder hanging 2-3 feet in the water. It's amazing
uh,
how many fish will suspend right at that bottom rung.
I will do you one weirder. When people put slides in the water,
Oh,
I don't
that
know
too.
what it is about slides, but that shit holds fish.
Yep.
What's
Yes,
the
it
most
does.
overrated dock feature?
Overrated?
Yep.
Probably the tires.
Really?
Yeah. I think
See, I
them
would.
gets pressured the most because most people are fishing the outside of the dock. So the tires probably see the most baits come right by them.
See, and I was going to say the end of the dock because
Well,
you can
that
tell a
too,
guy
but
when they don't know how to fish a dock because that's all they do is they plunk each edge and then the end of it, and
yep,
then they move on. Them are my
yep,
favorite guys to fish behind because I know I'm catching fish.
absolutely.
This one's also kind of a fairly obvious one. If you could only fish one bait on docks for the rest of your life, what would it be?
TNT tackle jig.
Yeah,
And
I hate to.
if I only had one color I could throw forever, it would be the Kurtz Kraft because it works in
Yeah,
dirty water, it works in clean water.
I'd have to say a perch colored Cinco. That's kind of my freaking go to.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. There's so many things you can do other than a jig and a Cinco too. I mean,
Oh
like
yeah.
you said, a chatterbait is totally a valid thing. Swim jigs
Yep.
work. Spinner
Yep.
baits.
Spinner baits are really hard to skip. They take, I know guys that can skip spinner baits. I know guys that can skip crankbaits, which crankbaits I cannot do it.
No.
Spinner baits I can, buzz baits I can. My three favorites are chatterbait, a jig, and a frog. And you would be amazed the excitement when you skip a frog between a pontoon and a motor and you can't see anything and you give it that one twitch and you hear it just explode underneath that pontoon because
Yeah.
it echoes all the sound out. I mean, it's an amazing sound when they just toilet flush one.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's one I really don't skip around docks very often is frogs.
It's a
That's
big
more of
bass
a
catcher.
tree line and that kind of shit.
Mm.
Um.
Let's keep it
All
that
right.
way.
Yeah. I'll just keep throwing my Cinco. I seem to do just
Okay.
fine. All right, now we're gonna move on to the last cast presented by TNT Tackle. Um, what's one dock fishing lesson you wish every bass angler understood?
Back fishing lesson.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
mean
what's
you mean to help them? You mean?
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
hand-eye coordination, looking at where you want the bait to go, not where you don't want it to go.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty important one. Yeah, that's really all I got. Couple of things I guess I want to touch on before we call it a night here. Coming up at some point, I would like to do an episode on our bass club. Just kind of go through the history, stuff like that. I think that'd be a really fun one to do. And then um, I also kind of want to just take a minute. Our club, we lost a long time kind of on and off again angler here in the last week. Just kind of a shout out to Jim Belge's family. Great guy. I mean, I remember him when I was a kid, not when he was a kid. He's significantly older than me, but Jim was such a good guy. It was always just happy to be there. It was definitely he saw the club and fishing for what it was, the memories and the camaraderie, and just something I think people should really take and kind of ponder a little bit. So many of us get caught up in the tournaments, and I mean there's a lot of days fishing just isn't fun anymore because I turn it into a job. um where him, it never seemed like that. He'd
It was
show up. I mean,
relaxation for him.
yeah, I mean, there was a lot of days me and Jim were fighting for last place. I mean, I'll be honest. And I'd come in so pissed off, and he'd pull up to the dock and be like, "Yep, didn't catch a damn thing," but just
Yep.
happy as could be.
Yep.
Um, so I
Yeah,
just
shout
want
out
to
to
put that
Jim's
out there.
families. I got him in the club. He used to work with me 30 years ago at Ramrod, and I kind of got him into the to bass fishing and got him in the club, and yeah, there's no plus in it. The only thing I will say is that he didn't suffer long, and he didn't last long when he found out. But um, it's a shame. Um, he will definitely be missed in the club.
Yeah. But yeah, folks, that's all we got for tonight. I want to thank everybody for watching. I guess, do the like, share, subscribe, and stuff, like I so eloquently say at the end of every podcast. Um, still working on that. I don't know what route I'm gonna go there, but yeah, I can't freaking stand that. I sound like a moron. But alrighty, folks, thank you very much.
Have a good night. Good fishing.
Thank you for watching the Timberline Bass Podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, comment, all that normal stuff. Thank you very much for your support.